Thank you, everyone. So I'll go in introducing our guest today. Is no other person than Dr. Abiodun Egbetokun, who is an accomplished scholar and innovation policy expert with over 2 decades of experience in evolutionary economics, entrepreneurship, innovation systems, and private sector development, particularly within developing countries. He holds a PhD from the Graduate College Economics of Innovative Change at the Friedrich Schiller University, Jena, Germany, along with specialized doctoral training in modeling systems and dynamics from the Dametech program. He is currently an associate prof of entrepreneurship and innovation for sustainable development, the Montfort University, Leicester, where he also leads the research student training program in the Faculty of Business and Law before joining the DMU. That's the Montfort University. Dr. Egbetokun spent nearly 2 decades in Nigeria. The National Center for Technology Management, rising to the position of Deputy Director, where he coordinated national policy research, consultancy projects, capacity building programs, and policy advisory work. His research and teaching spans engineering, innovation management, industrial policy, impact evaluation, and entrepreneurship development. He has published widely in peer-reviewed journals, delivered presentations at major international universities, and the Human Science Research Council, South Africa, Twesanian University of Technology, South Africa, and an Academy of International Affairs, Germany. Dr. Egbetokun is skilled in both qualitative and quantitative research methods, data analysis, and evidence-informed decision-making. A certified facilitator of online training programs. He remains committed to advancing innovation, knowledge, and policy practice across Africa and the global South. And we have no other person than Dr. Egbetokun himself. He's on now, so the floor is all yours, sir.
All right, thank you.
The opportunity. Let's give him a warm welcome. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you so much for the wonderful introduction. That's very kind of you, and yeah, I feel honored to be here today. I'll just share my screen, and yeah, we can take it from there. So can you please confirm that you can see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, in slideshow mode. Okay.
It is in slideshow.
So let me just, okay, so it's moving. I can confirm the technology is working good, because the thing with online sessions nowadays is that you have to confirm that the technology is working fine. Otherwise, we might spend half of the time, going
trying to
back and
fix
forth.
it. Yeah, we're fine.
Exactly. So I'm happy that this is working fine. Thank you so much for the kind introduction, and I'm happy to be here. So I would rely on yourself, Sandra, and any of the hosts in case something pops up in the chat, because now once my slideshow is in full screen mode, I can't really see what's going on in the chat. In case anything is going on there, please feel free to alert me to it.
Sure.
And to the audience, I will be happy to be interrupted at any point as I go on, because this is a learning opportunity. You know how they say that when you are speaking about something, you're also learning from it.
Sure.
That's the way I like to view this, because as I'm speaking to you, I'm also learning from it. All right. So I've known the convener of, I don't even know his role in Koozakar now anymore, but I know that he was he's one of the brains behind Koozakar, Kole Ayo. I've known him for a very, very long time. We worked together at NASETEM many years ago in Nigeria. We were together for a long period of time. So I feel very excited to see how Koozakar has grown over the years, and continues to grow. I'm convinced that this is a platform that will continue to grow and continue to support researchers, not just globally, but also particularly in the global South. Now, The conversation that I would like to have with you today is around a very specific aspect of the publishing process. Okay. And so the title is Making It to Peer Review: What Editors Look For and How to Avoid Desk Rejection. Now, somebody may ask, why do we want to focus on desk rejection? It is a bit counterintuitive to want to discuss how to help people to publish more, or how to support, maybe early career researchers and younger academics or researchers from the global south in publishing their work more. And of all the things that we could be talking about, we have chosen to talk about what editors are looking for and how to avoid desk rejection. I'll tell you, and you will see this better as we go along, that this is perhaps the biggest method in the arsenal of any researcher. This is perhaps the biggest skill that we need to have. In general, there's a method to the madness. And so I'm using the word madness in quotes now. The common saying, there's a method to the madness, to suggest that in the publication process, there are parts that are science and there are parts that are art. They are fine art, things that you just have to learn to the point that you know them almost viscerally. Knowing how to navigate, how to cross beyond the desk of the editor to the peer review stage is a fine art. It's not something that you can gain. In fact, it's not something that lies in the hands of the researcher. You have written your paper. It is now on the desk of the editor. Before the paper goes for review, the editor has a decision to make, either to send it back to you for whatever reasons they may have, or to take it through peer review when you get the chance for other people in the discipline or in the global academic space to take a good look at it and then come back to the editor and advise them whether this paper is worth pursuing or not. I thought it was important for me to lay that background in case anyone in this call today is wondering why we are talking about that. I think it's a very, very important aspect to talk about. And I will explain a bit more about that as I go along. Now, the second thing I would like to mention before I proceed is that, I am assuming that I'm talking to a group of people who don't want to publish just for the sake of publishing. I believe that I'm talking to a group of people who want their research to make impact. And that is the basis on which I will be saying all of the things I'm going to be saying today. So if there's anything I say that sounds a bit overly ambitious, overly simple, or overly complex, feel free to challenge me on that, because after all, this is knowledge sharing. Okay? Now, I'd like to start by talking to you about the role of an editor. In a journal, what in fact does an editor do? Okay? Now, many people may not be aware of this. That's why I've decided to start there. What an editor does is to manage the editorial process in a journal. Okay? Now, every journal, for the sake of those who may not be aware of this, every journal has some people. Typically, these are senior academics. So you may have figured from my bio as it was read that I'm not an early career anymore. I will not describe myself as the most senior out there, but at least I'm not in the early stages of my career anymore. So these are typically people you will find on the editorial board of a journal. I mean, there are spaces for early career researchers as well on the editorial board of a journal. In fact, one of the things I say to any of my PhD students and any PhD student that is close to me is that as early on in your academic career as you can, try and get some editorial experience. You can get it either by serving on the editorial board of a journal or by editing a book. that checks a lot of boxes for you. It checks that you have competence to manage a team. It checks that you have competence to judge the work of others. It checks that you have competence to do good research work yourself. And it checks the box that you are visible in your discipline or in your research space, okay? But that's a conversation for another day. For now, let's focus on what an editor does, okay? In most journals, you will find an editor-in-chief. You will find associate editors. Some other journals have what they call senior consulting editors. Then you will have editorial advisory board, and then you will have the editorial board. Okay, the editorial advisory board is more like it's more like a perfunctory role, people you can go to for advice from time to time, and sometimes people you can send papers to help you to peer review and so on and so forth. But for the sake of the rest of this conversation, we will focus on the editor-in-chief and the associate editors. In most journals, these are the people that have the role to determine whether a paper goes to peer review or is sent back to the authors. All right? Now, the hard fact, the hard reality, whether we like it or not, is that editorial work is gatekeeping. Journal editors play the role of gatekeepers. Now, their gatekeeping role involves identifying good quality content. So they are the first port of call for any paper, any good journal, any journal that is worth its salt. They would have an editor-in-chief and associate editors whose role is to gatekeep. A paper is not supposed to make it through the gates that is put up by these people if it does not meet rigorous standards of clarity, of coherence, and relevance. Note that at this point, we are not yet talking about the mechanics of the paper. Okay, whether every single equation in the paper, if it's an empirical one or a modeling one, is correct, whether every quote has been used correctly, whether the method has been discussed in detail, and so on and so forth. We're not yet at that stage. We're at the stage where we want to determine whether the paper is clear, whether it is coherent, and whether it is relevant, so that we can send it to peers, peer reviewers who will help us to determine, all right? So in front of the editors, the primary answer to which they are working, the primary threshold to which they hold every single paper is the standard of the journal. And by the standard of the journal, I mean the aims and the objectives of the journal and the scope of the journal. You see, every journal has a scope. Every journal has aims and objectives, and every journal has a target audience. Most journals that are worth their salt, if you go to their website, you will find these three pieces of information: the aims and scope, the target audience, and the aims, the scope and objectives, and the target audience. You will always find that on the journal website. So before you attempt to make a submission, you should go and check those things, all right? Now, all of these roles that I just described to you, however complicated or simple it may sound, I play that role in 4 journals at the moment. You're looking at the images of those journals. These are all Q1 journals. They are not small journals. In fact, they are top class. The Journal of Open Innovation, Technology Management, and Technology Market and Complexity is published by Elsevier. IEEE Engineering Management Review is published by IEEE. IJITM is the official journal of PICMET. PICMET is the Portland Institute for Competition Management of Engineering and Technology, or something like that. And it's published, the journal is published by World Scientific, and then Innovation and Development, which is published by Taylor and Francis and by Routledge at the moment. Okay, and I've done extensive editorial work with this journal. So all of the things I'm saying to you will be coming from the basis of this experience, and I want to make it as practical as we can. Now, having said all of that, let's quickly talk about how the editorial process works. 5 essential steps. It may be fewer or more depending on the journal, but essentially these are the 5 core steps. The first step is the author goes to the submission system of the journal, makes a submission. Okay, so step 1. Now, in step 2, once you click on submit, Again, I feel it is necessary to explain this before I go on to say every other thing, so that all of us will come to an understanding of what goes on behind the scenes, because not everybody knows. Okay, so once you click on submit, there is a journal office. Sometimes they are called administrative assistants, whatever name they are given. There is a journal office, there are people, and nowadays it's more and more becoming machines, artificial intelligence. But still, there's a lot of human agency involved in that process. There are people who will check that a particular paper, a particular manuscript is meeting the basic requirements of the journal. One of the things they check is word count. So if you send a 10,000 word paper to a journal that has a word limit of 8,000 words, that paper is almost automatically going to come back to you. The editor hasn't even seen it at all. Note that we're still in in stage 2 here. If a journal says we accept submissions only in MS Word, and you send a PDF file, that from stage 2, your paper is coming back to you. Okay, and so on and so forth. If a journal says put your tables at the end, and you decide to intersperse your own tables within the text, almost automatically that paper is going to come back to you. That's not a rejection at all. It's just these people will politely tell you that, please, we need you to reformat if you still want to make a submission, and then resubmit. All right. And then next is the editor-in-chief. Now, the editor-in-chief does some basic technical screening. Now, at this point, some journals will marry stages 3 and 4. So the role that the editor-in-chief would perform is married with the role that associate editors will perform. But in most journals, it is separated. So the editor-in-chief will receive the paper. Many journals have more than one editors-in-chief, all right? So the editor-in-chief will do a technical screening. Notice that what the journal office does is the administrative screening. The editor-in-chief will check that the paper is indeed relevant. Now, they check that it is significant, and they check that it meets a basic quality threshold. Now, let me tell you from first-hand experience what these editors-in-chief look at. You'll be surprised how simple it is, and which is why this kind of talk is very important, so that after having spent many years doing your research, you don't get turned down from a good journal that you have been eyeing all this while simply because of simple things, okay? Now, the average journal, and I can tell you this because I know, the average Q1 journal, okay, the average Q1 journal now receives at least 1,000 submissions in a year. And I'm being very, very modest there. There are journals that receive as many as 10,000 submissions in a year. So imagine if you've got an editor-in-chief or 2 or 3 editors-in-chief or 10 associate editors, each one of whom have their own day-to-day job and still have to adjudicate minimum of 100 to between 100 and 500 papers a year. How much time do you think they have to maze around? They don't have time. So what they look at first and foremost is the title. Okay, they look at the title versus the aims and the scope of the paper. If there is no fit, there's a good chance that that paper does not go forward. They look at the abstract, and that's it. Very generous editors-in-chief will go down and look at the conclusion, and that is it. Most editors-in-chief do not read the full text of the paper. So the first gate that you want to cross as an author is that gate 1 between the editor-in-chief and the associate editor. The editor-in-chief will look almost always at the title, the abstract, and the keywords at best. If they are feeling generous, they go down to look at the conclusion. So you already see the aspects of your paper that you need to frame very well now to cross the first gate. Now, in the second gate is the associate editor. This is where I do most of my work. Now, in some cases, the associate editor may simply say, look, Mr. Editor-in-Chief, I disagree with you. I don't think this paper is relevant to our journal. Now, the associate editor will come to that conclusion having read the very same things that the editor-in-chief has read. And in many cases, they read the introduction as well. Okay, I cannot remember the last time I read the full text of any paper that I have to adjudicate. That's not because I don't want to, but it's because this is not what I'm going to spend my entire research time or my entire career doing. No, it is the responsibility of the author, okay, to convince editors that their papers deserve a space in the journal. Ladies and gentlemen, we may not like the sound of that, but that's the reality. Because at the end of the day, editors are doing this pro bono, they are supporting. And we now work in a context where many authors are ridiculously entitled. Some author will send you a paper today, and 2 weeks from today, they're already sending you reminders. What's the status of my paper? Are you accepting or not? Please let me know. And when you send back a rejection to that kind of author because they were pushing you, you are trying to decide whether this is a marginal case or not, and they pushed you. It becomes easier to just say, okay, look, maybe you should carry your business elsewhere. And those kinds of authors, in their impatience, will start, lashing out at editors and associate editors. Sometimes I read things on social media and I know that people who write these kind of things just don't understand how the process works, all right? So an associate editor can agree or disagree. If they agree with the editor-in-chief, that is gate 2 that has not been crossed by this paper, automatic desk rejection, and it goes back to the author. If they disagree, this is the point where they then say, okay, on the basis of my reading of the introduction, I think this paper has a chance. So gate 2 has been crossed, and let us go and select a reviewer. The job of the reviewer is to read every single word in the paper. Now, I have to say that I don't know what reviewers do, but when I get papers to review, I tend to read most of it, if not all. All right? Are we together so far? Okay? All right. Please, like I said in the beginning, feel free to interrupt me if there are any questions or you want me to repeat anything, you want me to slow down or speed up. So our goal today, as I said in the beginning, is to discuss how you can cross those 2 gates. I want to believe that now you understand that those 2 gates represent desk reject. If the editor-in-chief turns you back, it's desk reject. If the associate editor turns you back, it's desk reject. Okay, papers that cross those 2 gates will be the ones that will go on to peer review. So what do you need to do to cross those 2 gates? Those are the things we want to talk about today. But before I go on to share the tips that I have, let me first and foremost clarify, all right, that there's a method to the madness. That's the simplest way to put it. There are specific things that we know, or let me say that I know from my first-hand experience and several years of editorial work that form the reasons for desk rejection. There are 4 of them majorly. It's either the paper does not fit the scope of the journal, the paper does not have novelty, there's nothing new. Now, let me dwell on this a little bit. I call this the so what. If a paper does not answer the so what question, if as an editor I have to struggle to find an answer to the so what question, then that paper is almost automatically going back. Not because I don't like anything that the authors have done, but because I just do not see the value of whatever the authors have done. Now, there are several decision options, which I will come to later. So that when you get a rejection, in fact, a desk rejection or whatever kind of rejection is not the end of the world. There are ways to deal with this, which I will talk about in a moment. Now, a paper can be desk rejected for methodological flaws as well. If an author is claiming that they are using mixed methods, and then I skim read the paper, and the only thing I see no numbers, but I see only qualitative quotations, interview quotes, then there's nothing mixed about that. Okay, then that will go back. There's a fundamental methodological flaw. Maybe not so major, maybe it's something that can be fixed, but it is still methodological flaw. There is also the aspect of poor presentation. Okay. Now, in all of this, what you want to think about as an author is, what am I contributing empirically? What am I contributing theoretically? What am I contributing in terms of method? You could make a contribution in any of those 3 areas, and this is where your novelty comes in. So I read the paper and I ask myself, so what? Okay, so influence of new technology adoption on agricultural productivity in the UK. A paper has that title, sounds attractive, sounds interesting, sounds relevant on the surface. But then the question is, and so what? What are we going to learn that we didn't know before? Is there some empirical novelty? Is there theoretical novelty? Is there methodological novelty? These are the things that editors are looking for. And if they are absent in a paper, they are most likely to be desk rejected. All right, so what is the retinue of decisions that you could have? All right, so I like this cartoon very much. You'll find it funny. Now, this cartoon actually is the graphical abstract for a paper. That paper, I put the link in at the bottom there, at the bottom of the slide, is the graphical abstract of a particular paper. Now, the overview of the paper suggests, as you would guess from the comic, that the author is handing their paper to the editor, and they are literally screaming, "Publish this paper, okay? Publish it, my friend." And the editor is asking, "Why should I?" All right. So that paper is about, giving some specific tips around how to ensure that your paper is not desk rejected and that you convince the editor. All right. Now, there's a whole spectrum of decisions that that editors will send back to the authors. Reviewers, in most cases, the review process is double blind. So reviewers are not supposed to communicate with the author. So you could either say we are accepting as is. This is an extremely rare option. In fact, most papers will not come to this option until after 2 or 3 rounds of revision. You could get a minor revision the first time. You could get a major revision, in which case there are some fundamental problems. You could get a major revision and re-review. Now, the difference between a major revision and re-review is that when you get a major revision, the revised document you submit is sent to the same reviewers that gave you comments the first time. But if it's a major revision and re-review, it means that it is treated as if it were a new submission, and it may or may not be sent to the same reviewers that looked at it before. A reject and resubmit is that we don't want this paper unless, and we're going to insist that you do the things that we are saying you should do. And you have the option of resubmitting to us after you have done those things. Again, that may sound similar to major revision, but it's not. Now, a reject says that we don't want this paper. We're happy for you to go elsewhere. But if you want to come back to us, you must do the things that we are saying. A major revision gives you the option to argue. So if we say change something, you can come back with a rebuttal and say, no, I don't think I should do that. And you try to convince us. All right. Now, there could be the polite reject that says, we don't want this paper. If you have another paper, please send it to us. Nobody wants to do that. And then finally, there's the funny part, reject, and please, we don't want to see you again. Again, this is another real extreme. But trust me, between me and my editor-in-chief, we have issued this decision to an author once before. We said, look, we are now tired of seeing papers from you. Of course, we didn't use that language precisely, but we did say something. We did say something along that line, okay? I won't go into the details of why we did, but I can tell you it does happen. If it never happened before, I would not have put it here, okay? Right. So what are the specific things you will do to avoid desk reject? I want to believe that everything I've said so far is clear. If it is, then I can pick up pace at this point a little bit. The first, before I go to the first thing, which is communication, let me just clarify here quickly that I have 10 specific suggestions that I believe I have distilled over, my several years of my own practice. And recently, I came across a paper that captured it very, very nicely. That paper is in the link at the bottom of this specific slide. Now, they talk about 10 things you need to do to ensure that the editor does not desk reject your paper. 5 of those things have to do with communication, and another 5 have to do with rigor. Now, if you read that paper by Bogeldick and Bird, you're not going to find it exactly the way they have written it here. This is my own expression, but that paper is a very good reference for you to read. So we can distill those things you need to do into 2 broad categories, communication and rigor. So communication is about clarity, coherence, structure. Rigor is about the depth of research, the theoretical grounding, the empirical evidence that you provide. So I'm going to walk you through, these 10 tips as quickly as I can so that we can have time for some questions. Let's start with communication. Okay? Now, why are we starting with communication? One, because we can assume that you've done good research. If you have not done good research, then that's a different cup of tea altogether. All right? Don't even attempt to publish if you have not done good research. But I can say to you very quickly that even though when we evaluate scientific ideas, we want to, and in fact we should evaluate them based on merit, not by the language that they use. But I can tell you the way a paper is written, or the way, and this is true also, not just for papers, it's also true for funding applications, grants, applications, and so on and so forth. Anything you write, the language you use can help to signal quality in a specific way. There's a paper that was published by Peng and Co. in 2024, just last year. I think this was published in either Nature or Science, where after looking at a corpus of thousands of published research articles, they identified 139 scientific promotional words that you could use to beautify your work. I would encourage you to take a look at that paper. Oh yeah, it was published in the Proceedings of National Academy of Science, so high profile, okay? Some of those words include compelling, critical, crucial, essential, and so on. Mind you, you don't want to just be using those words. You know, the point I'm making here is that the language you use is so important in signaling the quality of the work that you have done. Okay, so the first step under communication is to develop a story. Many of us, because we have taken time to do our research, we forget that at the point of writing manuscripts, we become storytellers. You are a storyteller. If you cannot tell a coherent and clear story, then the paper is going to struggle crossing the editor's desk. I have read many papers where the introduction is like water and the literature review is like oil. And you know, water and oil, they do not mix. You don't want to write a paper like that. Now, the rule of thumb is we need to be aware that good writing cannot save bad science. In other words, if the piece of work is poor, no matter how well you write, the low quality will not be salvaged. But it is in fact true that poor writing can destroy good science. So somebody could have done an excellent piece of research, but if they do not write well, if they don't communicate well, then it may take away a lot of value. So in your story, what you want is that the introduction will connect to the problem. The problem will connect to the method. The method will connect to the results will connect to the conclusion, and the conclusion will connect to the implication. So there's supposed to be a single red thread. I'm just saying red, it could be any color. Think about it with, mentally, any color. So when you write a paper, just imagine that you are drawing a single thin line from page 1 to the last page. As you are reading the paper, that line must not break. If that line breaks at any point, then you need to fix it. A very good analogy for that is the robot approach. Okay, you can read about it in the link that I put at the bottom of that slide. Now, use the robot approach. Some will say use the KISS approach, K-I-S-S, keep it simple and stupid, or whatever, however we want to say that. So please write your paper as if you are writing it for a robot. Now, some will, in doing research, we used to say that a lot of things are not linear. But when it comes to research writing, no matter how complex your piece of work is, your writing has to be linear. If your robot encounters any difficult argument, it's going to break. Okay? So if you don't define something before telling your robot, it's going to break. You have to be clear. If anything you say does not make sense, the robot will break. If the robot does not understand anything that you are saying, it's going to break. So where you can use simple language, by all means, use it and be formal. Okay? This is the robot approach, ladies and gentlemen. That's helped me extensively, that's helped my students extensively, and I know that it can help you. And I want us to take a pause here and do a very quick exercise. Can anyone just unmute and tell me, what do you think is wrong with this title based on everything we've said about communication? So let's take our robots to this title. What is wrong with this? Yeah, what is wrong with it? Anyone who is trying?
It is not specific.
It is not specific. How do you mean by, how do you mean? Because I can read digital payment platform, that's specific. I can read financial inclusion, that's also specific, isn't it?
Maybe you can call it, it's not measurable.
What is not measurable there?
Because they are talking about just an assessment.
Okay, they're talking about just an assessment. Yeah, not measurable, not specific. Yeah, I mean, we can, if I were doing these hands-on and as a long masterclass, say we had 3 hours or 4 hours to do this, I would have said you guys should come up with alternatives for me. But unfortunately, we don't have that time now, so we'll move on. I'll show you how simple.
One
Yes,
more
please.
thing is that it is not talking about any specific location, like, assessment of digital platforms where.
Right.
But not about the location, not about the industry.
Right. Okay, excellent. Now, anyway, this is, you won't believe this. This is an actual real life title of a PhD thesis. Okay, in a university. So you see the ellipses at the end, those 3 dots, and you are correct in picking that it is not localized, okay? Those ellipses suggest that there is a continuation. I intentionally removed the continuation, which localizes the title for the sake of, anonymity, all right? But you see, let me tell you the simplest problem with this title, which if fixed, most other things will not become a problem. If you are looking at the improved options that I put on the right side of the slide, you will immediately see what that might be. It is the use of the on. And how many times have I seen titles like this on papers? If I had a penny for every time I've seen a title like this, I'll become a millionaire by now. Assessment of digital payment platforms adoption on financial inclusion. So the problem is, what about digital payment platforms adoption is going to affect financial inclusion? That is what we want to assess, not digital payment platforms adoption itself. Okay, so this title does not tell us anything about what the work is trying to do. If you look at option 1, the concise option among my improved options, this is clearly suggesting relationship, digital payment platform adoption, and financial inclusion. And we can finish it with the locality. Or option 2, if what we are after is a causal relationship, it will be the impact of digital payment platform adoption on, you see, if we cut the impact of away, we are back to where we started from, and we replace that with assessment. We're back to where we started from. But this is more precise because it tells us that we are looking at impact of A on B. The original title is simply assessment of A on B. What does that mean? All right? Or we could be looking at determinants and effects. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is where communication begins. Remember that I said this is one of the decision variables for the editor-in-chief. They will look at this. So, an editor-in-chief sees a title like this, they already form a semi-impression, a semi-final impression, right? It's like the paper has already gotten a yellow card. It hasn't gotten a red card yet. God help the author, they write a good abstract. If they do not write a good abstract, in almost all cases, papers with titles like this will not cross gate 1, let alone gate 2. Okay? So let's go to the second one. Write a clear introduction. I cannot overemphasize this one. The reason you are introducing your paper is to draw the reader in. And this is true for the editors themselves, okay? So every introduction must have some key elements. 3 of them: the what, which is the research question, the so what, which is why we are doing this, and the now what, which is, okay, after we have done this, where are we going? Okay, I put a very nice example, what I consider to be a very nice example on the right. And you can read more and many, many more examples on the MIT Com Lab of MIT. They have this entire microsite dedicated to helping people write very good abstract. If you look at the example, you see the way they have incorporated the key element. It starts with a general background, goes to a specific background, states the problem, and then identifies the aim of the paper. This is what a good introduction should look like. Okay, this is what it should look like. And you can see that we can go from here to a very, very strong abstract. If you reduce that first section to one sentence, you reduce the second section, that specific background, to one or two sentences, the statement of the problem, one sentence, the aim of the paper, another one sentence, you already have the first half of your abstract. You only need to add the method, the findings, and the conclusion, and then you've got a solid abstract. This is what a good introduction should look like. Make sure your introduction is as clear as it gets. One of the best ways to check your introduction is to give it to people who are not associated with your research to read. If they raise any question, you can be sure that anybody else can raise the same question. So that helps you to fix and improve. Number 3, know your audience. Who are you writing for? Okay? When you write for a journal, check the scope of the journal. Now, in many cases, some of us will write papers and journal A rejects it. We just go off and submit it to journal B because the titles of those journals are similar. It doesn't always work like that. You need to go and check the target audience of the journal. For instance, IEEE EMR, where I'm an associate editor, is a practitioner journal, okay? We are not looking for so much technical jargons as we are looking for practicable recommendations. If your paper has not got it, no matter how competently done it is, we're not going to take it. It is that simple. All right. So you need to know the target audience of the journal so that you can write for that audience. I think that's quite self-explanatory. Now let's take a look at an example here. So if we were writing a particular section of a paper for an informed technical audience, we can begin to use all of those highlighted languages. Seed any dynamo, Biermann battery, fields are system size and weak, electron Weibel instability, and so on and so forth. But we are writing the exact same thing for a general audience, completely different. Let's take the first few sentences so you see what I mean. This project will focus on reassessing the importance of the initial magnetic fields that are required to seed any dynamo. Whereas the one for the general audience starts with the universe is magnetized. Anybody would wonder after reading that first sentence, the universe is magnetized. Wow, how? And then it goes on to tell us about how the universe is magnetized. No single jargon anywhere, yet everything makes perfect sense. All right? Now, this is how you frame your writing depending on the audience. Number 4, avoid vague wording. My PhD supervisor told me many years ago, the secret to good writing is have something to say it, and once you have said it, just keep quiet. Stop. I have read so many papers where authors go on and on and on and on and on, explaining things that are not needed. Have something to say. Once you have said it, just stop. Just stop. Don't use flowery language. Nobody's interested in all of that. And nowadays, printing is getting, less and less in vogue. We read things much more electronically nowadays. Maybe that's what creates the temptation for people to keep writing and writing and writing. But I can tell you, even though printing is becoming less and less mainstream, journals are becoming more and more stringent with space. In those days, you could find papers that are 15 to 20,000 words in a journal. You will never find any journal that publishes even a 12,000 word paper these days. Nobody does it anymore. So you have to be precise, to be concise with your terminologies, with your writing. Don't use ambiguous terms. Anything that is not going to be exactly clear, do not use it. We don't want unnecessary complexity. If you use a term, make sure it is defined. Then finally, under communication, write a clear abstract. I already spoke about abstract a little bit. you could use many different structures. So let's take two examples, structure 1 and structure 2. In structure 1, you start with the background, you go to the problem statement, you explain what you show, you explain what you do, identify the results, and draw some implications. In structure 2, you start with your takeaway instead, what you did, why you did it, the gap that you are addressing, what you found, and the lessons to be taken away from it. Okay? This is how to write a good abstract. And it should be clear because this is the first thing that most editors, after your title, that they will read. If they are not convinced at that point, there's a good chance that they don't want to take the paper forward. All right. This is just elaborating on the example that I showed earlier. And the final point under communication is if you need help with language, please seek. Now, this is an exercise which I won't have time to go into now because I'm mindful of time as well to leave some opportunity for questions and answers. That this you can do on your own time if you want to take a screenshot of how I would punctuate these sentences. And it changes the meaning completely depending on the punctuation marks that I put there. So, one question for you before we move on and I begin to wrap up is, do we agree that good writing cannot save bad science now? Now, once we agree on that, I can rush through the remaining slides in a few minutes, that journal articles need to demonstrate rigor, which is the second part of what will help you to cross gate 1 and gate 2. Now, you need to distinguish between literature review and theory. Many papers would have a section after introduction where they say literature review, whereas all that they are doing there is theorizing. Others would have a section that they call theory, whereas all that they are doing there is just descriptive literature review. Say what you mean and mean what you say. Number 2 is that I do not know of any paper that makes it through gate 1 and gate 2 in any serious journal. I underline serious. I don't mean, Journal of Ajanle Koko University. No, not those kinds of journals. Serious journals like the ones you will find with Koozakar, for example. Now, I do not know of any serious journal that will allow a paper to go through if the theoretical mechanisms are not clear. If you are saying A is affecting B, what is the theoretical logic behind that relationship? Why do we see what we see? This is what would define the kinds of variables and constructs that you measure. We need clarity around that. All right? And then once you have identified the theoretical channels, if you are doing any empirical analysis, whether it is quantitative or qualitative, okay, you need to isolate the theoretical channels and test them correctly using the right construct. Someone discussed a paper of theirs with me yesterday, and the feedback they received from the reviewers is that they define their construct in a certain way, but the way they have measured it is totally unrelated to what they have defined. And I see this all the time as an editor. I see that in a paper, it is a red flag, a big red question mark. That paper cannot go forward. And it's so unfortunate that sometimes, some of us as academics will receive that kind of feedback and we think that the editors are biased against us. This is not a case of bias. If you tell me you are measuring A, then I want to see you in fact measure A. If the construct you are using to measure the A is not related to A, then there's no explanation for that, all right? It is not everything that you can explain away in a paper, which is why any paper should be based on very, very good research. And then number 4 is what I was just talking about. Constructs and measures need to be clear, all right? So look at my second bullet on this slide. If a variable is not contextually relevant, then we're not going anywhere with the paper, all right? For instance, I do a lot of research on innovation. If I want to study innovation in a country like Nigeria and I'm using patents as an indicator of innovation, it's a poor indicator because not only is the data hard and very sparse, it's patenting in a country like that is not as common as patenting in the UK, for example. So if I want to study innovation, farm level innovation in a country like the UK, and I use patents, that's all right. But if I do that in a country like Nigeria, then I probably will be looking at outlier companies that are more likely to patent. So if I come up with the results, I find the results that patent is strongly associated with innovation, then that result is almost entirely driven by self-selection, because the companies that I will find that have reported patents in Nigeria are also the same companies that are more likely to innovate. I wouldn't have studied anything. So our variables, our constructs must be related not only to to what we want to measure, the phenomenon, but also into the context. And finally, everything must tell. All right? When you write a paper, what you do is you start with the introduction where you sketch out your ideas. By the time you have written everything down to the conclusion, you need to revisit your introduction again and refine to be sure that all promises you made in the introduction, you have in fact fulfilled them by the end. And the abstract should be the last thing you would write in a paper. So you will come full circle. That way, that imaginary red line or blue line or whatever color you chose when I asked you to imagine a line, you will ensure that the line is not broken anywhere. Let me conclude with this final statement that understanding and meeting editorial expectations is your key to successful publishing. And I'm really hoping that the 10 tips I've shared will be very helpful in moving you along that journey. I want to thank you. And if you want to stay in touch, you will find me on LinkedIn. That's my LinkedIn header there, or you can reach out by email. Thank you so very much. I will stop here and then we'll leave room for some questions and answers. I'm hoping that we have time for that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is so rich, and I'm glad we recorded this session for us to go back to it. I will be giving rooms to people who had comment additions. You have some comments you want to make at this time. You have questions. If you have your questions, you might want to put them on the chat. We might not be able to give room to 50 plus people to make their comments or questions, but the floor is all open. You can raise your hand just to give a call to organization. And we have, I want to recognize the supporters of Koozakar, people who have been behind the scene, working tirelessly to make sure this group of us, this team can be here today. So I want to thank, just a moment, I want to recognize people by their name. I might not be able to call all the names of all the people, but as much as possible, the very few names I can see on my screen is Olumide Ajayi. We want to welcome you and thank you for all your support, your tireless nights, working around behind the scene. We also want to thank Kola Wale, Omaya Jawo, and Victor Shobanke, and every other person working behind the scene. That this time we might not be able to call your names. We want to say thank you for your support and all you do. And the floor is all open. I have Ajayi. You might want to take this moment while people are sending their questions to give the citation. Olumide Ajayi, are you here? Can you come on camera? Let's see your face.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Thank you very much, ma.
Yeah, it'll be good to see you on camera. The floor is
Oh,
all
okay.
yours now.
Oh, okay, yeah, thank you very much. So it is indeed a real, thank you very much for your presentation, Dr. Egbetokun, sorry. It is a privilege to have you in our midst, and it is even a greater privilege to be able to read the citation of Koozakar. According to Eddie Howe, it said you have a chance of making a greater team when you have great people, and the contributions of stakeholders like you, like yourself, and other relevant stakeholders make Koozakar what it is today. Please grant me the liberty to proceed to read the citation of Koozakar. Koozakar, more than a publisher. In just a few years, Koozakar has achieved outstanding milestones. Several of its journals are now indexed in major scholarly infrastructures, including DOAJ, COSREF, and multiple institutional and international repositories. These accomplishments testify to its credibility, dedication to quality, assurance, and commitment to advancing open knowledge, further strengthening its mission to make African and Global South research discoverable, citable, and globally competitive. Koozakar's growth has been further propelled by strategic partnership with respected institutions across Africa. These include the African Institute for Science Policy and Innovation at Obafemi Awolowo University, OAU in Nigeria, the Group for Research and Strategic Study on the Congo at the University of Krishna in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the Niger Delta Institute for Emerging and Re-emerging Infectious Disease at the Federal University of Otoke in Nigeria. Through these collaborations, Koozakar strengthens research capacity building, editorial development, interdisciplinary projects, and student mentorship while advancing shared goals of scholarly excellence and feasibility. These networks have supported commentary initiatives, feasibility projects, academic workshops, and expanded reviewer and editorial training programs. Beyond publishing, Koozakar drives impactful initiatives such as Project Agora, which converts published articles into high-engagement scholarly commentaries, and the Koozakar Curiosity Lab, which provides interdisciplinary training, mentorship, and research development support to students and early career researchers worldwide. These efforts alongside reviewer recognition programs like Chairs to Peers, editorial leadership pathways, and new research hubs reflect Koozakar's long-term vision to democratize research opportunities and dismantle equities within global academic publishing. Despite the challenges of operating as an independent Africa-led publisher within a competitive global landscape, Koozakar continues to grow, innovate, and advocate for fairness in knowledge dissemination. Every challenge has strengthened its resilience. Every partnership has expanded its reach. Every index journal has solidified its role as a transformative force in scholarly communication. Today, Koozakar stands as one of the few global academic ecosystems internationally designed to uplift Global South researchers, offering not only publishing pathways, but also visibility, mentorship, community, and long-term academic empowerment. Through its expanding journals, international partnerships, training programs, and global networks, Koozakar remains committed to building most dynamic and Through its expanding journals, international partnerships, training programs, and global networks, Koozakar remains committed to building the most dynamic and impactful research and publishing community the world has ever seen. A future where every researcher, regardless of geography or circumstance, can be seen, read, cited, and celebrated. Thank you very much for being here today. And then we really appreciate you, and thank you everyone for being here. Thank you.
So thank you, Mr. Olumide Emmanuel. That's a great one. And we have some people who have raised up their hands to ask some questions. So how do I know? So we have Oluwa Durotimi. You might want to unmute at this time to ask your question.
All right, thank you very much. And I want to thank the presenter for this sound presentation. It was very rich. So my question is, what do you have to say about preprints? Like authors have carried out a research, and they, the first thing they do is to, upload it to a preprint platform. And then in some cases, you find those authors submitting that same paper to a journal. And then the first thing that the editor-in-chief might want to do is, to check for similarity index, and is finding out that the manuscript is having very high similarity with the preprint. So in that case, as an editor-in-chief, what would what decision would you take? The science is good, the abstract is good, but the issue now is it was submitted to a preprint prior to submitting to a main journal. That's my question.
Okay. Do you want us to go one by one so I respond to every question as they are asked? Is that okay?
I think we don't have so many people who have raised up their hand, so you can take it one after the other before I read the
Okay.
one on
On
the
the
chat.
chart. Okay. All right. Thank you. Well, the answer to this one is very straightforward. Thank you so much for that question. The answer is very straightforward. A preprint, by definition, does not preclude journal publication. What I mean by that is the following: that a paper has been included on a preprint server does not mean that you cannot submit it for publication. Any well-trained editor should know that if the significant portion of similarity that is coming, that is coming after the plagiarism scan of a paper is coming from the same paper on a preprint server, then that is not a problem, because by definition it is the same authors or author, as it were. It is the same piece of work and so on and so forth. However, the caveat is the following: that a preprint is not, all preprints are not the same. Okay? There are some preprint servers like, say, for example, academia.edu. There is, what's it called now? ResearchGate, which is one of the biggest ones. There is Munich Repec Personal Archive, where you can basically, once you have finished your paper, because you want to stay ahead of the curve, we can have a whole, a whole big conversation around the benefits and disbenefits of preprints. But, you want to be ahead of the curve, claim credit for your idea, you put it out in the preprint. That does not preclude, publication. And several of these preprints also nowadays attach DOIs to the paper, which makes it have the semblance of a fully published journal article. But there is a category of preprints that are beginning to appear. And because these preprints are going mainstream, they tend to have the appearance of a full-fledged journal publication, a full-fledged publication. One of them is archive, ARXIV, it is spelled, where AR is small letter, X is capital, I and V are small letters. If you put a paper on archive, most journals might just argue that that paper is as good as published because the viewership is going to be high. Sometimes you can elicit, or you can what's the word now? Yeah, you can elicit is the right word. You can elicit open peer review for these papers. If you've already done that, then what's the business of putting that paper back in a journal? So I don't know if you get what I mean. A preprint does not preclude you from submitting the paper to a journal. Any well-trained editor will not penalize you for that. But you have to know the difference between types of preprint servers that are out there, and put your paper in the right one that does not take away the agency of being able to put it in a journal away from you. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, that answers the question. But I would want to solicit if we could have like a full session on this topic, maybe some other time. Yes.
Well, don't talk to me about that. Talk to Cornelio.
We will look into that. That's not a problem, because I know that this is a session that would take more than 1-2 hours. It's going to be like, going into breakout rooms, asking one-on-one questions and having hands-on. So it's intensive. We'll have to talk to the people working behind the scene to see how that is possible. So maybe in the near future, the near days, we can do such. So I want to call the second person. You can unmute yourself, sir. Mr. Is it Shailendra?
Shailendra, yeah.
Shailendra, okay.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation. My question is where and how we can join the editorial board, as you have mentioned that it would be a good practice to start, joining the boards, particularly for someone who is fresh at research.
Yeah. Well, that's a very, very good question. Thank you for that, Shailendra. Joining an editorial board is not something that just happens. You have to be intentional, and it is not automatic. Now, there are 3 options. There are three options. Again, we can have a very long conversation around this. So please bear in mind that these answers I'm giving are potentially oversimplified considering the constraint of time that we have today. So there are three options. One is that if you publish well on a particular topic and you review actively for a narrow set of journals in a particular disciplinary area, there's a very good chance that somebody will reach out to you at some point to say, hey, we have a space on our editorial board. Would you be interested? So this is where your profile speaks for you and attracts that attention. That's one option. Now, the second option is that you can actively or proactively reach out to the editorial board, usually the editor-in-chief of a particular journal that you may be interested in, to check whether they have opportunities. And usually if you send that kind of email and you attach your CV, many editors are happy to look at it and advise you whether they are looking for someone or not. So that's the volunteering pathway. There's also the option that many publishers, well, maybe not too many, some publishers do make open calls for editors. I know that a lot of, what is this publisher called? Springer. Yeah, a lot of journals in the Springer family of journals sometimes issue open calls. So if you go to the Springer open family of journals, you might just run into one or two open calls for editors to which you will apply and they will appoint. These are the options that you have. There are several other ways that this can happen. For instance, all of the journals that I edit now, I was specifically invited by the editors-in-chief for a specific reason. Time will not permit me to go into the lengthy story behind each one of them, but that's exactly how it happened for me. But those three options that I've explained are very good options to have. But beyond everything, what I think is very, very important to every aspiring editor is to build good credibility, build a solid research pipeline such that whenever anybody checks you out and you express interest in being an editor, they know that you've got what it takes. Thank you. So I hope that answers your question, Shailendra.
That does indeed. One more thing as a follow-up. Do you have any sort of positions, or do you know anywhere where these positions are visible and they are open to accept someone as editor?
I don't have any at the top of my head, but we can stay. Shailendra, we're in touch, so we can talk about this. Like I said, I did mention Springer. Springer is one of the biggest publishers in the world. In fact, they have a family of journals that they refer to as Springer Open. They are always calling for editors. I know that the Wiley family of journals as well, they are always actively calling. It helps if you can go to the website of some of these publishers and sign up for their newsletters so that whenever there are these openings, you will receive that information.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I will pass it back to the moderator, please. Yeah.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. This has been a mind-blowing session for me, and I'm sure to many others. I can see a lot of comments, a lot of clappings. Great job, Dr. Egbetokun. So much side comments and appreciating you for this presentation. So I have, where and how can we join the editorial board, as you have mentioned? I think you've taken some of these questions at the starting point. It is good to have such experience, and also when you are at the starting phase. I guess you've answered this.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let me move. It says, keep it, okay. I think that's all for now, except we have people who have comments. You have some additions, or you want to clarify anything. He's here now. He can take that on.
If I may, I think I spotted one or two questions in the chat. There is one about, someone has written a question in French, which
what is
unfortunately...
the fate of authors? Yeah, I can say it. So what's the fate of authors who are secondary English speakers? Example, course Spanish, Italians, Russian, speakers with weak English speaking writing abilities.
Yeah, I mean, I read the question and it has two parts. The part about what's their fate, and if they use AI to support them in writing, they are penalized. So let me start from that part. We are in a world now where people use artificial intelligence to write and review. Using artificial intelligence to write, when it does not go too far beyond polishing language, I'm happy with that. But if I read a paper and it is written like it was written by ChatGPT, then I usually push back to the authors, all right? But it is completely unethical to write the entire piece using ChatGPT. That's not you anymore. Using any other tool, any other large language model out there, that's not you. And it's outright unethical to use any AI tool for peer review. You can use it to support as a reviewer. You can use it to support decision making as an editor, but it should not replace human agency. Imagine if a doctor stood, God forbid, anyone here has a life-threatening ailment and you have to undergo emergency surgery. You are conscious enough to ask just one question, and you see the surgeon holding the scalpel over your whatever part of the body, and you ask them, how are you trained? And they said, I read everything on ChatGPT. With every last bit of energy in you, you probably would jump off that operation table. So we don't want researchers who have written their papers with ChatGPT. It's as dangerous as, a doctor, a surgeon that wants to perform operation having learned from ChatGPT or whatever tool out there. However, it is a valid concern that is becoming more and more visible in the global research landscape, that English is the language of global science. That's a reality. However, there's a lot of knowledge on the periphery that is marginalized because of these language barriers. There are not many journals in any other language apart from English. That's a fact that we have to face. And because of that, a lot of the bibliographic databases, Scopus, Web of Science, and all of that, even Dimensions, which is relatively new, they pick up mostly these English-speaking journals. So people who do not have English as their first language are under pressure. If they want to be internationally visible, they have to publish in English-speaking journals. So that disadvantage exists and it is real. I think what we need to do more and more, and when I say we, I mean the global community of researchers, is that we need to support one another more. Now, one thing I used to do when I started out, as a PhD student, I would be allocated, just after finishing my PhD, my supervisor allocated 1 or 2 papers in a journal that is editing to me to review. And when I finished reviewing the paper, apparently the paper came from someone in the Middle East because of the structure of the syntax and the diction. And then at the end of my review comment, I wrote there that I think this author needs help from a native English speaker. Now, my supervisor did not edit my comment at all. He sent it that way to the authors. And in his own editorial comment, because usually when an editor-in-chief communicates with the authors, sharing the review comments as well, they will write their own verdict. In his own verdict, he mentioned explicitly that this decision I have arrived at, not so much because of the comment about language, which you can ignore. And then he gave his substantive reasons. That taught me a lesson. You see, language is one of the easiest things you can fix when it comes to writing. The responsibility is on the researcher to communicate clearly. If they are clear enough, then we want to support as much as we can. Many years ago, journals used to have free language, what do they call it now? They have free proofreading services that once they have accepted your paper, they will proofread it for you. They don't do it anymore. They don't do it anymore nowadays. So part of the conversation that we want to have in the global research landscape is how can we support non-native English speakers, not to marginalize them. But the reality as we have it today is that English is the global language of science, and every researcher would have a certain level of responsibility that if you want to publish in an English language journal, you have to figure out how to go about communicating clearly. Unfortunately, I can't offer a better answer than that. I'm sorry.
This is an awesome session, very insightful. Do we have any other contributor? Caller Wale, Caller Ayo. Do we have anyone that wants to say something before we call it a day? So we want to thank you, sir. It's been very insightful. I'm thinking we should have some kind of webinar that's maybe more than 1, 2, 3 hours, which is in person, but I know with time, Koozakar would probably organize conferences that will bring people into states where we can have hands-on. For the recording, some people are asking for the recording. So I'm going to talk with the team behind this thing, Koozakar, to get back to you on the recording. Maybe there will be a platform where you can go listen to it or something. So in the absence of no other contribution, we might want to call it a day, but just give me a moment. I want to check. Okay. So I got some questions. Adoga Peter. We'll get back to you, Adoga. I just got a message sent from you. I'm sure it's not something you want me to read on this platform. So in the absence of none, Mr. Dr. Egbetokun, do you have any last words before we call it a day? We want to thank you. It's been very insightful, very mind-blowing for me. I learned a lot too. So.
Yeah, I mean, it's just to, again, as I said in the beginning, thank you so much for organizing this and for giving me the opportunity. I hope it's been very useful. I'm always very open to do this again and again. In part of my job role and also my personal ambition nowadays is to help and support as many comics as I can. So please feel free to reach out if you feel there's anything I can do, either individually or also from the Koozakar side, if there's a way we can support and scale these things up. I'm always available to help. So again, thank you very much. And it's been a pleasure meeting every one of you. Thank you, Madam Sandra, for the wonderful moderation.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Do have a blessed, I don't know, UK, do have a blessed evening. Yeah, it's morning for us here.
Yeah, it's afternoon now. I know it's morning for you in the US. You guys are enjoying it. It's afternoon now.
So thank you, everyone. Thank you so much. You have a blessed evening, blessed morning, blessed afternoon, depending from where you came from.
Thank you,
But
everyone.
we would have this session again and we will let you know when it will be. I don't want to give a date and a time because of a lot of things going on, but we'll get back to you as soon as we have a date and a time. So thank you so much. So all our supporters, all the people working behind the scene, thank you, sir, for your hard work.
Thank you.
So have a blessed day.
Bye.
Bye.